research and correlating the Red Summer of 1919 and the things that are going on now, is that when African American veterans returned from the war, the riots were in regards to housing, health, and the need for higher education. It's funny how 100 years later, we're still having those type of riots, but it's for a different cause. Brutality that was experienced during that time, it still resonates now. And, you know, I, like my fellow trustees, have experienced driving in the car and the anxiety that you feel when an officer gets behind you and you don't know what that interaction is going to be, and the way that your palms get to sweating and your heart gets to beating, and you don't really know what's going to happen. And so sometimes you switch lanes so that you aren't in that moment of truth, or you turn down the street so that you can avoid that uncertain interaction. So I'm not going to act like being policed is not something that I haven't experienced. But what I have experienced as a result of having a presence in place during that really volatile time was a relationship that manifested into a respectful relationship. The people that were my SROs when I was in high school evolved into our chief of security, Mr. Webster, and one of our security officers that is at Kalamazoo Central, Officer Ray. And so what I want to say mainly is that I don't support being policed, but I do support allowing officers that have taken the oath to protect and serve to do what it is that they need to do to keep people in this community safe.
I wanted to address really primarily the role of SROs in schools. I'm hearing a lot of differing opinions on whether or not that's appropriate, but what keeps coming out is in the defense of having officers in our schools is that we are being told that they are mentors, that they are coming to activities, that they are reading books, that they are forming relationships with students in all of these ways. All of those roles can be filled by people who are not also police. So I'm not sure that I'm understanding, you know, I'm not making that connection. You know, yes, we do need mentors. We need people to come in and read books. We need to let community in to do that. We don't need police to do any of that work. And I think that while I understand that it is a building level decision, that money that we spend, about almost $70,000 for each of those buildings, Loy-Norix and Kalamazoo Central, that we spend on paying an SRO, I wonder how much of that money, it's at-risk funding. So I would imagine that could be applied to additional training for staff in those buildings on, you know, conflict resolution, on restorative practices, on, you know, de-escalation techniques. So I think, like one of our callers said, we need to really imagine better. We need to get out of this like fear-based rut and imagine a different way to do things.
I highly, I'm very moved by the comments that have been made by my fellow trustees. I think that Trustee Harrison, you've made a wonderful and needed comment on its education. If you're going to break generational poverty, if you're going to break biases, if you're going to break, which they all need to be broken. They need to be broken. It's through education. It's through what we are in charge of. And the call to more funding, more adequate funding is huge. It is a weapon that we can use to change this. I love that we've been talking about creative and coming together. The comments that we have heard thus far are from folk in the trenches, real folk, and not just folk that are employed by us, but with families and lived experiences. I want to stay in my own lane and listen to these lived experiences. I want to establish a strong sense of what the people who are there are educating me about. It is a time for me to listen.